At a family reunion, my husband told everyone he was having an affair with my cousin. He smiled and said he was leaving me for her. I stayed calm and smiled back. Then I told him something that shocked him completely. Looking back, the warning signs were flashing like neon lights. I should have been more suspicious when Aston, my usually disinterested husband, suddenly volunteered to host our annual family reunion. This was the same man who'd spent years crafting elaborate excuses to avoid even the smallest family gatherings. Yet there he was, fussing over menu choices and debating tablecloth colors like Martha Stewart's protege. I'm Sophia, and what I'm about to share isn't just a story of betrayal, it's a tale of how karma works in mysterious ways. That fateful day began with an almost artificial perfection. The morning sun poured through our expansive windows, casting a spotlight on the feast we'd prepared, as if nature itself was setting the stage for the drama about to unfold. One by one, our relatives arrived armed with homemade dishes and warm embraces, unaware they were walking into an emotional minefield. My sister Addison has always been my personal radar for trouble. She showed up early, her intuition already picking up signals I'd been trying to ignore. As we arranged crystal wine glasses, she watched Aston buzzing around like a caffeinated hummingbird. "Something's not right with him," she murmured, her words confirming the dread that had been building in my gut. "He's acting like a completely different person." I could only nod, the knots in my stomach tightening. Then came Annalise, my cousin, though after today, that title would feel like a bitter joke. She swept in wearing a red dress that screamed mistress rather than family lunch. Her perfectly painted lips curved in a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sophia, darling," she exclaimed with Hollywood-worthy enthusiasm. But her gaze was already hunting through the room. When her eyes found Aston, I caught it. That tiny flicker of recognition, the split-second smile that passed between them. After 10 years of marriage, I could read Aston's face like a book, and that micro-expression told me everything I needed to know. The scene reached its climax during my father Leonardo's traditional speech about family values. Oh, the irony. Aston chose that moment to interrupt, tapping his glass with a spoon, wearing that insufferable smirk I'd grown to detest. "I have an announcement to make, Gavranam," he proclaimed, commanding the attention of every person in our pin-drop, silent dining room. 20 faces turned toward him, including mine, though I already knew what bombshell he was about to drop. "I believe in honesty," he began, without a hint of shame, "and it's time for me to be honest with everyone here." My fingers turned to ice around my wine glass, but my mind was surprisingly clear. I'd seen this coming, had been preparing for months, though nothing truly prepares you for public humiliation. "Annalise and I are in love, so," he announced, reaching for her hand across our mahogany dining table and the same table where we'd shared countless family meals. "We've been seeing each other for the past year, and we've decided to be together openly. Sophia and I are getting divorced." The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. The room froze, every eye darting between Aston and me, waiting for the inevitable meltdown. My mother Valentina started to rise, ready to rush to my defense, but I remained perfectly still. Instead of tears or screams, I took a deliberate sip of wine, placing the glass back on the table with a soft clink. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice as smooth as aged whiskey. The look of confusion on Aston's face was priceless. Clearly, this wasn't the scene he'd scripted in his head. "Sophia?" he started, his tone dripping with fake concern. "I know this must be shocking." "Not really," I cut him off, rising from my chair with the grace of someone who'd been expecting this performance. "Though I am curious about one thing, Annalise. Did he promise you a share in the business?" "That might be a little more complicated than you expected," I said, watching as Annalise's perfectly manicured fingers clutched Aston's hand like a lifeline. "What do you mean?" she asked, her confidence wavering for the first time. I reached for my phone with deliberate slowness, savoring the moment. "Oh, you'll see soon enough. Don't let me interrupt your little celebration. I'm sure you both have grand plans to discuss." My father, ever the protector, started to rise, his face flushed with righteous anger. "Sophia," but I raised my hand, halting his words. "It's completely fine, Dad." "Really?" I turned to address our shell-shocked audience, playing my part perfectly. I apologize for this unexpected dinner theater, everyone. Please enjoy the food. I just need some fresh air. The sound of scraping chairs and rising voices followed me as I stepped onto our terrace. Addison was right behind me, her protective arm around my shoulders before I could even take a deep breath. You knew about this, she stated rather than asked, her voice a mix of concern and curiosity. For months, I confirmed, typing a quick message to Jesse, my lawyer. And I've been getting everything ready. Ready for what? She pressed, just as my phone lit up with Jesse's response. I showed her the message. All documents prepared. Operation Karma is green-lit. Sophia, Addison's voice was barely a whisper. What exactly have you done? Through the window, we could see Aston gesturing animatedly, trying desperately to maintain control of his carefully planned moment. Annalise stood beside him, her hand possessively on his arm, already acting like the lady of the house. If only she knew. What have I done? I echoed, allowing myself a small smile. Let's just say I made sure Karma has an excellent legal team, dear sister. And believe me, she's about to show her teeth. I watched as understanding dawned on Addison's face, followed by a gleam of admiration. Behind us, the family drama continued to unfold like a soap opera. But for the first time in months, I felt absolutely serene. Aston thought he was demolishing my world today, but he'd actually just walked straight into my carefully laid trap. The next morning found me in Jesse's office, watching him methodically sort through the mountain of evidence I'd been gathering. My best friend Shanice sat next to me in a plush leather chair, playing social media secretary with my exploding phone. 37 concerned messages asking if you're okay, she reported, scrolling through her phone. Oh, and one particularly nasty note from Annalise calling you an ice queen. Want me to respond to any? Not necessary, I replied, my attention fixed on Jesse as he pulled out a crucial file. Let them talk. Jesse adjusted his glasses, spreading documents across his impressive desk like a winning poker hand. Everything's perfectly aligned, Sophia. The timing is actually impeccable. Aston signed all the transfer documents just 3 days ago, thinking they were routine business papers. Show me again, I requested, leaning forward eagerly. Jesse pointed to Aston's signature, bold and arrogant, decorating the bottom of each page. These documents, he explained with professional satisfaction, grant you controlling interest in all 3 subsidiary companies. The memory hit me like a tidal wave as I stared at his careless signature. 6 months ago, while Aston was busy planning his grand exit from our marriage, he'd grown sloppy. It started with the little things, the way he'd tilt his phone away from me while texting, his newfound password obsession. Then came that fateful night when he left his laptop open and Annalise's message popped up like a neon sign of betrayal. Can't wait until she's out of the picture. Everything will be ours. Sophia? Shanice's gentle voice pulled me back from my bitter memories. Are you with us? I straightened in my chair, pushing aside the past. I'm fine. Just thinking about the day I decided to stop being a victim and start being a strategist. Jesse gathered the documents with practiced precision. Your strategy was brilliant. The business is yours now. Aston's shares in the parent company are about as valuable as monopoly money without controlling interest in the subsidiaries. My phone lit up with Addison's call and I put it on speaker. Sis, you won't believe this. Her voice crackled with excitement. Aston's at the bank right now having a complete meltdown because his access codes aren't working. I glanced at my watch. Perfect timing, like a Swiss clock. Did he try the IT department? I asked innocently. Oh, yes. Addison's laughter bubbled through the speaker. They gave him the corporate equivalent of new phone who dis. Said they could only take orders from the majority shareholder. You. Shanice was practically bouncing in her chair. This is better than those revenge movies I binge watch. Oh, it gets even juicier, Addison continued. Annalise is with him, and she's not handling the news well. Something about broken promises of a lavish future together. Jesse picked up another document, his eyes twinkling behind his glasses. Speaking of broken promises, let's discuss the prenup he insisted on. The irony is absolutely poetic. His own prenuptial agreement completely protects your independent acquisitions during the marriage, including the businesses I've quietly taken control of. I finished, allowing myself a small victory smile. Just then, Jesse's assistant appeared at the door, trying to hide her own smile. Mr. Aston is on line 1. He sounds rather agitated. Jesse looked at me for permission, and at my nod, he put the call on speaker. Aston's voice filled the room, vibrating with barely contained fury. Jesse, what the hell is going on? I need those accounts unlocked now. Jesse's response was professional ice. I'm afraid I can't help you with that, Aston. I represent the majority shareholders' interests now. What are you talking about? Those are my companies. Aston's voice cracked with indignation. Actually, I cut in, savoring each word. They're not. Not anymore. The silence that followed was worth every minute of the past 6 months of planning. Sophia, you're behind this? Aston's voice crackled through the speaker, disbelief mixing with anger. I'm simply protecting my interests, I replied coolly. You taught me that lesson, remember? Always be one step ahead in business. This is insane, Manatee sputtered. I'll fight this. With what resources? I countered. The personal accounts are frozen pending our divorce settlement, and the business account, well, you've already discovered that situation. Annalise's voice cut through in the background, her panic palpable. You said everything was handled. You promised me. I'll call you back, Aston snapped before hanging up. Shanice broke into a slow clap. Now that was a masterpiece. Jesse leaned forward, ever the cautious lawyer. He'll try to fight this, you know. Let him, I said, rising from my chair with newfound confidence. Everything was done by the book. He signed every document willingly. His ego made him careless. He never imagined I could outmaneuver him. My phone lit up with the text from Mom. Your father's fuming about the scandal, but I'm proud of you. Dinner tonight? Going to face the family tribunal? Addison asked from the speakerphone. I grabbed my purse, feeling weeks of tension melting away. Yes, it's time they met the new Sophia. Sometimes karma needs a helping hand, and I've decided to become her executive assistant. Walking out of Jesse's office, I could practically hear the sound of Aston's empire crashing down. The symphony of consequences was sweet indeed. The familiar smell of garlic and childhood memories wrapped around me as I entered my parents' house. Mom was in full stress cooking mode, a family trait I'd inherited. 3 different pasta dishes already crowded the kitchen counter, filling the air with Italian comfort. Mama? I called out. She spun around, wielding a sauce-covered wooden spoon like a conductor's baton, her apron spotted with marinara. Sophia, taste this sauce. Does it need more basil? Before I could answer, Dad's voice thundered from his study. Is that her? Sophia, in here now. Here comes the lecture, I muttered, squeezing Mom's hand as I passed. Inside the study, Dad sat enthroned behind his massive desk, every inch the traditional patriarch. Close the door, he commanded. I complied and took my seat, keeping my hand steady as I smoothed my skirt. What you're doing, he began, his voice heavy with disapproval. Taking a man's business from him. It's not right. Taking what's rightfully mine, I corrected firmly. His hand crashed down on the desk. It's vindictive. This isn't how we handle family matters. Family matters? I couldn't help but laugh, the sound sharp as broken glass. Like how Aston and Annalise handled things? By humiliating me in front of everyone? That's different, he insisted. Why? I challenged, my voice rising. Because he's a man? Anger flared in my chest as I faced my father. So I'm just supposed to let him do whatever he wants while I smile and take it? My father's face flushed crimson. You're acting out of anger. No. I leaned forward, my voice steady and clear. I'm acting out of self-respect. Something you taught me, remember? Never let anyone make you feel small. Those were your words. The heavy wooden door of the study creaked open, and my mother appeared, her hands leaving damp marks on her flour-dusted apron. Leonardo, enough. Her voice carried the weight of years of unspoken thoughts. Our daughter is right. She turned to me, her eyes soft but determined. Valentina, listen to me. For 10 years, we watched Aston parade you around like a prize, crushing your spirit, making light of everything you achieved. The buzz of my phone cut through the tension. Aston's name appeared in my inbox. I read his message aloud, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Sophia, we need to talk. What happened between us doesn't have to affect business. We can work something out. Please be reasonable. Ha! See? My father gestured triumphantly. He's trying to be reasonable. I typed a quick no thank you and looked up. He's not being reasonable. He's panicking. Annalise is probably figuring out he's not the wealthy cat she thought he was. My mother's warm hand found my shoulder. How are you really doing, sweetheart? I'm okay, I replied, surprising myself with how true it felt. Actually, I'm meeting Jesse and his wife to discuss next steps. Jesse, your lawyer? My father's frown deepened. More schemes? Strategy, I corrected him, rising from my chair. And protection. Aston won't go down quietly. As if the universe wanted to prove my point, my phone rang. It was Addison. Sis, she said urgently, Aston just left my office. He tried getting me to convince you to be reasonable. When I refused, she paused. He hinted at having dirt on Dad's old business dealings. The color drained from my father's face. I switched to speakerphone. What exactly did he say, Addison? Something about irregular payments from the 90s. He's bluffing, right? My father shot up so fast his chair slammed against the wall. That bastard! He promised those records were destroyed. Dad? I watched as decades of confident swagger crumbled before my eyes. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Leonardo? What records? He collapsed back into his chair, suddenly looking frail and old. It was a different time, he whispered. Business was different then. I held up my hand, speaking quickly into the phone. Addison, I'll call you back. I turned to my father, my heart pounding. Tell me everything, now. 20 minutes later, I sat in my car, my hands trembling as I punched in Jesse's number. Cancel dinner plans, we need to meet now. Aston's playing dirtier than we thought. What's wrong? Jesse's voice was sharp with concern. He's going after my father. Old business dealings that could destroy everything. I started the engine. I'm heading to the office. Bring your father's records. All of them. I gunned the engine, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Aston wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was ready to burn my entire family to save himself. But he'd made one fatal mistake. I wasn't his docile wife anymore. Silently swallowing his betrayals. My phone glowed with a message from Mom. Do what you need to do. Protect our family. I love you. Taking a steadying breath, I shifted into drive. If Aston wanted war, he'd learned that karma wasn't his only enemy. He'd created an adversary with nothing left to lose. Jesse's office was bathed in the lonely glow of his desk lamp when I arrived with the old files. Shanice sat beside him, the blue light of her laptop reflecting off her glasses as her fingers danced across the keyboard. You won't believe what I found about Annalise, she said without looking up. Later, I dropped the weathered files onto Jesse's desk. This comes first. Jesse opened the first folder, his face growing darker with each yellowed page he read. This is serious, Sophia. If these payment records got out, my father would be ruined, I finished quietly. Shanice finally looked up. How did Aston even know about these? The memory hit me like a lightning bolt. The fishing trips, I breathed. Every summer with my father. I grabbed my phone, calling Addison. Those fishing trips with Dad and Aston, were you ever there when they came back? Sometimes. They'd be drunk, talking about the good old days. Her voice trailed off. Oh, God. Dad talked, didn't he? Bingo. I hung up as Jesse began sorting the documents into urgent piles. Okay, we need to... The door crashed open. Annalise stood in the doorway, mascara streaming down her cheeks like black tears. You bitch, she snarled. You've ruined everything. Shanice moved to intercept, but I held her back. Please, I said coolly, enlighten me about how I ruined your perfect plan to steal my husband and my money. He was never supposed to be poor, she shrieked. This isn't what we planned. I leaned forward, catching her slip. We? The color drained from her face. She stumbled backward, but Shanice was quicker, blocking the exit. Sit down, I commanded. Tell me everything. Actually, Jesse cut in, his lawyer voice sharp, you do have to talk. Right now, you're an accomplice to attempted corporate theft, so sit down. She crumpled into a chair, her expensive dress wrinkled, her perfect facade cracking. It wasn't my idea, she whispered. Start talking. Marcus started it. The name hit me like a physical blow. Your ex-husband? She nodded miserably. He knew about Aston's gambling debts. Said if I could get Aston to leave you, to transfer the business assets before the divorce. Underground poker games, high stakes. He owes a lot, Annalise whispered. My phone lit up with Aston's message. Last chance, meet me tomorrow at noon, the cafe where we had our first date, or Daddy's secrets go public. I passed the phone to Jesse, whose face broke into his first smile of the night. Perfect. He's desperate. Shanice spun her laptop around. Speaking of desperate, look what I found. Emails between Marcus and Annalise plotting everything, including their backup plan to blackmail your father. Annalise collapsed into sobs. I'm sorry. Marcus threatened to expose my secrets if I didn't help. I never wanted to hurt anyone. Save it. I cut through her tears. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything about these poker games. Names, dates, amounts, everything. I can't. These people are dangerous. I leaned closer, my voice barely above a whisper. More dangerous than me? Because right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and fraud charges. Our eyes locked in a silent battle of wills before she reached for her phone with trembling fingers. I have pictures from when I followed him one night. Jesse studied the photos, his excitement building. This is perfect. These games are illegal. One anonymous tip to the authorities. No. I stood up, my mind crystallizing around a better plan. First, we meet him tomorrow. Let him think he's winning. Then we destroy him completely. What about me? Annalise's voice was small, childlike. I looked at my cousin, this woman who tried to steal my life, now broken and afraid. You're going to help us. Consider it your redemption arc. And Marcus? A cold smile crossed my face. Oh, he'll get exactly what he deserves. I turned to my team. Jesse, draft immunity paperwork for Annalise. Shanice, prepare those emails. Tomorrow at noon, we're having a very interesting coffee date. As Annalise signed the documents with shaking hands, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. Remember what I taught you about forgiveness? I typed back, yes, but first, justice. Looking around Jesse's office at my cousin's tear-streaked face, my friend's determined expressions, and the damning evidence scattered across the desk, a profound calm settled over me. Tomorrow, Aston would learn that Karma wasn't just a bitch. She was a carefully orchestrated symphony of consequences, and I was about to conduct every note. The next day, the cafe stood frozen in time. The same vintage posters on exposed brick walls, mismatched chairs, and rich coffee aroma that had surrounded us 12 years ago when Aston first asked me out. But while the cafe remained unchanged, I was transformed. I chose a corner table, positioned perfectly to watch both exits, and waited for my symphony to begin. The cafe buzzed with lunchtime chatter. Shanice sat casually at the counter, her laptop open, playing the role of a busy professional. Across the street, Jesse and Addison waited in their car, ready for my signal. At precisely noon, Aston strutted in wearing his favorite power suit, Italian wool, perfectly tailored to project authority. I remembered how he used to preen in front of the mirror wearing it before important meetings. He slid into the chair across from me, his practiced smile as artificial as his sincerity. You're looking well, he said smoothly, as if this were just another business lunch. Cut the small talk. I kept my voice ice cold. You threatened my father. He leaned back, fidgeting with his gold cufflinks. My father's Christmas gift, now a symbol of his betrayal. Business is business, darling. You forced my hand. Like you forced Annalise's hand? His smile flickered, just for a moment. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and hit play. Annalise's tearful confession filled the space between us, laying bare every detail of his scheme with Marcus, the gambling debts, everything. The color drained from his face like water from a broken glass. You're bluffing. Am I? I slid an envelope across the table. These are copies of your IOUs from the poker games. Impressive numbers. I wonder what the Gaming Commission would think. You wouldn't dare, he hissed. But his trembling hands betrayed his fear as he opened the envelope. Try me. I produced another envelope. Oh, and those documents about my father? The statute of limitations expired 3 years ago. Your gambling debts, though? Those are very current. His knuckles whitened against the table edge. What do you want? Sign these. I laid out the divorce papers. Full settlement, you keep your personal assets, what's left of them. No alimony, no claims on the business. And if I don't? Then in about, I glanced at my watch, 30 minutes, an anonymous tip about illegal poker games reaches the authorities. With proof. His face twisted with rage. You vindictive. Careful. I cut him off, my voice deadly quiet. Think very carefully about your next words. The cafe door chimed right on cue. Annalise entered, followed by Marcus, their timing perfect. What is this? Aston half rose, panic crossing his face. Sit down, Marcus growled. We need to discuss the money you owe me. Aston's face cycled from angry red to sickly white. You told her? She told me everything, I replied. The borrowed money from Marcus to cover your gambling debts. Your promise to give him a piece of my business after marrying Annalise. One small flaw in your plan, it was never your business to give away. You set me up. Annalise's voice cracked with emotion. Used me to get to Sophia's money. Made me betray my own family. Marcus loomed over our table. I want my money, Aston. Now! I don't have it, Aston stammered. Then sign the papers. I pushed them toward him. Yeah, walk away clean. Start fresh. His hand shook as he reached for the pen. This isn't over. Actually, it is. I nodded to Shanice, who pressed send with a satisfied smile. Those emails between you and Marcus? Every board member just received them. Your business reputation is finished. I watched the last traces of arrogance drain from his face as he scrawled his signature across each page. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I learned from the best. I stood, gathering the papers. You always said business was about staying one step ahead. Marcus clamped a heavy hand on Aston's shoulder. Time for a private chat about payment plans. Sophia, Aston called as I turned to leave. I'm sorry, I never meant... Save it, I cut him off coldly. You're only sorry you got caught. Goodbye, Aston. Jesse and Addison were waiting outside. Did he sign? Jesse asked urgently. I handed him the papers. Every page. How long until it's official? I'll file them today. By next week, you'll be free. Addison wrapped me in a tight hug. You did it, sis. My phone buzzed. Mom, is it done? Yes, I typed back. Family dinner tonight? Her response was immediate. Of course, your father's making his famous lasagna. Says he's never been prouder of you. Through the cafe window, I watched Aston crumble under Marcus's quiet threats. Annalise caught my eye, mouthed thank you, and slipped away into the crowd. Ready? Addison squeezed my arm. I took a final look at the cafe, where my story with Aston had both begun and just ended. More than ready. Time for a new chapter. Aston's desperate pleas to Marcus drifted through the open window as we walked away, but I didn't look back. Karma had done her work, and I had a family dinner to attend. 1 week later, my heels echoed against the polished boardroom floor as 12 pairs of eyes tracked my path to the head of the table, Aston's former seat, my seat now. Good morning. I set my laptop down. Shall we begin? Harold, the oldest board member, cleared his throat. Ms. Sophia, given the unusual circumstances of your acquisition, you mean how I legally obtained controlling interest while my husband was busy planning to steal it through his mistress? I smiled pleasantly. Those circumstances? Nervous laughter rippled around the table, but before Harold could respond, the door crashed open. Aston stumbled in, disheveled in a wrinkled suit, eyes bloodshot and wild. This meeting can't proceed, he announced. I'm contesting the transfer of shares. Without looking up from my laptop, I pressed the security button. Security, please escort Mr. Aston out. You can't do this. He slammed his hands on the table. These people need to know what kind of woman you really are. Now I looked up, my voice still quiet. You mean the kind who caught her husband trying to embezzle company funds to pay off illegal gambling debts? The boardroom fell into a deathly silence as Aston's face turned an ugly shade of purple. That's right, I continued, my fingers steady as I pulled up the documents on the projector. Let me show everyone exactly what kind of person I am, and more importantly, what kind of person you are. The screen filled with damning evidence, detailed spreadsheets of Aston's underground poker losses matched against suspicious company transfers. Each number told its own story of betrayal. I've already reported these discrepancies to the authorities, I announced, my voice carrying to every corner of the hushed room. The company will cooperate fully with their investigation. You're lying, Aston sputtered, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. The boardroom door swung open again. 2 security guards entered, followed by Jesse and, causing a ripple of whispers, Annalise. Actually, Annalise stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. She's not. I've given my statement to the investigators about everything. The gambling, the theft, the plan to take over the company. Aston lunged at her with a snarl, but the security guards intercepted him. As they wrestled him toward the door, he shouted, Your father's no better. Tell them about his dirty dealings. My father, I replied with ice-cold composure, has already disclosed his past irregularities to the board's ethics committee. Unlike you, he's taken responsibility for his actions. Harold rose from his seat, authority in his bearing. I moved to formally recognize Sophia as CEO and chairperson, effective immediately. Seconded, Maria, the youngest board member, called out decisively. The vote was unanimous, punctuated by Aston's fading threats down the hallway. Now, I turned to the screen. Let's discuss the company's future. 2 hours later, I stood in my new office, Aston's former domain, watching the city sprawl beneath me. Jesse entered with a fresh stack of papers. The authorities want to interview you tomorrow about Aston's activities, he said, and Marcus has apparently skipped town. Good, one less problem. My phone rang. Addison. Sis, turn on the news, now! The office TV flickered to life, showing Aston being led out of his favorite underground poker club in handcuffs, surrounded by other arrested players and the club owner. Anonymous tip, Jesse smirked. Imagine that. Shanice burst in, brandishing her phone. Have you seen? It's everywhere. Social media is exploding. How's Annalise doing? I asked. Better. She's in therapy, wants to make amends. The door opened once more, my parents this time. Dad stared at the TV, then met my eyes. I was wrong, he admitted softly. You handled this exactly right. Mom squeezed his hand, tears in her eyes. We both underestimated you, sweetheart. Another news alert flashed. Local business tycoon arrested for fraud and illegal gambling. More arrests expected. Good. I savored the word. You know, Jesse observed, for someone who just took down her cheating husband, exposed a criminal gambling ring, and became CEO of a major company, you seem remarkably calm. I turned from the TV to face my family and friends, my true support system through everything. That's because for the first time in years, I feel completely in control. No more pretending. No more compromising who I am. My phone lit up with Annalise's text. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I won't waste it. Looking around at my supporters, at the empire I'd protected, at the future I'd secured, I finally let myself feel the full weight of my victory. Karma hadn't just helped me survive, she'd helped me thrive. And this was just the beginning. 3 months later, reporters swarmed the courthouse steps for Aston's arraignment. Ms. Sophia, any comment on your ex-husband's plea deal? How does it feel to be the youngest female CEO in the industry? I strode past them, Addison and Jesse flanking me like bodyguards. Inside, whispers echoed off the marble halls as we made our way to courtroom 3. You don't have to be here, London, Addison murmured. The prosecutor can handle this. I want to see his face, I replied firmly. I need to. The heavy courtroom doors swung open. There he was, Aston, drowning in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. Gone were the designer suits, the arrogant smile, the perfectly styled hair. He looked small, diminished. All rise, the bailiff's voice boomed. As the judge entered, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Annalise slipped into the back row, hiding behind dark sunglasses. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave a slight nod of solidarity. In the matter of the state versus Aston, the judge began. The proceedings moved swiftly. The prosecutor methodically listed the charges: fraud, embezzlement, participation in illegal gambling operations. Aston's lawyer, a far cry from his once prestigious firm, looked defeated before he even spoke. Your Honor, my client wishes to change his plea to guilty on all counts. A shocked murmur rippled through the courtroom as Aston's shoulders slumped in defeat. Very well, the judge intoned. Mr. Aston, please rise. As he stood, Aston turned slightly, his eyes finding mine. For just a moment, I glimpsed a shadow of the man I'd married, but it vanished like smoke. Before I accept your plea, the judge continued, do you wish to make a statement? Aston cleared his throat, his hands trembling slightly at the podium. I stood in the courtroom, my heart beating steadily as Aston addressed the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to speak to my ex-wife. The judge gave a simple nod, and I felt my spine straighten instinctively as Aston turned to face me completely. Sophia, he began, his voice breaking in a way I'd never heard before. You were right about everything. I was arrogant enough to believe I was the smartest person in any room. I thought I could just take whatever I wanted without consequences. But you outplayed me at my own game. And what kills me most is that you did it all legally. Perfectly. His words hung in the air as he continued. Everything I taught you about business, you turned right back on me. You beat me fair and square. The judge's patience seemed to wear thin as he interrupted. Is there a point to this? Aston nodded quickly. Yes, Your Honor. I need to say that I'm sorry. Not just for my crimes, but for underestimating you, Sophia. For betraying you, for foolishly thinking you were just some trophy wife who wouldn't dare fight back. The prosecutor rose from his seat, clearly eager to move things along. Your Honor, while this is certainly touching, we do have a plea agreement to discuss. The judge agreed. Indeed. Mr. Aston, this court accepts your guilty plea based on the agreement with the prosecution. You are hereby sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. As the judge detailed the terms and restitution payments, my phone vibrated. It was Marcus, my former poker dealer. Boss, you were right, found the offshore accounts, sending details now. I forwarded it to Jesse without even glancing his way. That conversation could wait. The sharp bang of the gavel pulled me back to the present moment. As the bailiff led Aston away, he made one final attempt to catch my eye, but I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, unmoved. The reporters swarmed outside the courthouse, and this time I decided to stop. Ms. Sophia, what's your response to your ex-husband's courtroom apology? I adjusted my blazer with practiced composure and spoke clearly. Actions have consequences. Mr. Aston's choices destroyed our marriage, nearly ruined our company, and ultimately devastated his own life. Let that be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can exploit others without facing repercussions. Back at the office, I found my parents waiting in my executive suite, my father proudly holding up a bottle of champagne. I take it the board meeting went well? I asked, already knowing the answer. He beamed. Unanimous approval of your 5-year plan, and the stock price has jumped 12% since Aston's plea deal was announced. My mother began pouring the champagne, raising her glass with a smile. To karma, she offered. To justice, my father added. To both, I agreed, clinking glasses with them. My phone buzzed once more, a message from Annalise. Thank you for not mentioning my involvement in court. Starting my new job next week. Clean slate. I replied simply, make it count. Standing at my office window, I gazed out at the city skyline, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of victory. The company was flourishing, Aston was facing his consequences, and I... Earth to Sophia! Addison's voice cut through my thoughts as she waved her hand in front of my face. Where did you just go? I turned back to my family with a genuine smile. Just thinking about tomorrow, we have work to do. Because karma isn't just about justice. Sometimes she opens doors to new beginnings, and I was ready to walk through every single one. The next morning, I stood outside my old cafe. Our old cafe. The autumn air carried the familiar scent of coffee and fresh-baked pastries as I turned the key in the lock. When the realtor called yesterday saying the owners were selling, I didn't hesitate to make the highest bid. It's absolutely perfect, Shanice breathed, running her fingers along the exposed brick wall. But why this place specifically? I smiled, remembering all the memories these walls held. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well. The vintage posters had faded with time, and the mismatched chairs desperately needed new upholstery, but the foundations were solid, just like I had been after Aston's betrayal. My phone buzzed with a message from Jessie. Marcus found in Bali. Local authorities moving in now. Shanice caught my expression. Good news? She asked. The best kind, I replied, just as the bell above the door announced a new arrival. Annalise walked in, looking different, more like the cousin I remembered from childhood in her simple jeans and sweater. When you asked me to meet here, she said, glancing around nervously, I almost didn't come. But you did, I said softly, pulling out a chair. Sit. We need to talk. She perched on the edge of the chair, fidgeting with her sleeve. I heard about Marcus. They found him, I confirmed. He'll face charges, but that's not why I asked you here. I slid a folder across the table. Her eyes widened as she opened it. A business proposal? The cafe needs a manager, I explained, someone who understands both business and redemption, someone who needs a genuine fresh start. Tears welled in her eyes. After everything I did. The past is past, I cut in gently. What matters is what we do now. The door chimed again as my parents arrived, followed by Addison and Jessie. Well, my father asked expectantly, taking in the space. Is it official? I held up the keys triumphantly. Just signed the papers this morning. My mother pulled out a small wrapped package. Then you'll need this. Inside was a framed photograph. Me at 16, working my first job as a barista, learning lessons about hard work and independence that would shape my future. Remember what you told me that summer? She asked softly. That someday you'd own your own cafe. And now she owns an empire and a cafe. Addison grinned. Jessie cleared his throat. Speaking of empire, the board approved your proposal for the foundation, helping women in business. They were particularly impressed with the mentorship program. I turned to Annalise. A program I hope you'll help with. Your experience could help others avoid similar mistakes. She wiped her eyes, nodding. I'd like that. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Former business tycoon begins prison sentence. Ex-wife's company reports record profits. Shanice read over my shoulder and smiled knowingly. You know, for someone who lost everything, Aston sure helped you find yourself. No, I corrected Shanice with quiet certainty. I found myself. He just made the mistake of standing in my way. The afternoon sunlight painted golden stripes across the wooden floors through the tall windows, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Outside, the city rushed by in its endless dance, but inside our old cafe, time seemed to hold its breath. To new beginnings, my father raised an imaginary glass, his eyes twinkling with pride. An old wisdom, my mother added warmly. Actually, I said, moving with purpose behind the familiar counter, this old place still has a working espresso machine. Let's make this toast properly. My hands found their way around the machinery as if no time had passed at all. As I worked, I caught glimpses of myself in the polished chrome surface. The woman reflected there wasn't the same naive one who had once sat here, blushing at Aston's first dinner invitation. She was forged in fire, tempered by betrayal and made stronger by every challenge, complete in herself. I served everyone lattes adorned with perfectly crafted foam hearts, a skill I'd never lost, and lifted my cup with purpose. To Karma, I said thoughtfully, who showed me that true revenge isn't about destroying others, it's about rebuilding yourself into something stronger. To Family, Annalise added, her voice soft but steady, who believe in second chances when you least deserve them. To Justice, Jesse chimed in with a knowing smile, raising his cup, served both hot and cold. Laughter filled the space, warming it better than any heater could, and I felt the last puzzle piece of my life click perfectly into place. The empire I'd fought to protect would continue to soar. This cafe would bloom into something new yet familiar. And the foundation would become a beacon for women searching for their own strength. Aston? He was just another lesson in my story, a chapter complete but not defining. Because the real story had always been about my journey, finding my power, claiming my voice, and choosing my path. The bell chimed again as curious customers began drifting in, drawn by the lights and the undeniable sense of welcome that seemed to radiate from within. I stood behind the counter exactly where my true journey had begun, all those years ago, ready to write the next chapter, this time completely on my own terms, because sometimes karma doesn't just balance the scales, sometimes she helps you build something far more beautiful from the ashes of what you've lost. And in the end, that's the sweetest revenge of all, not just surviving, but thriving in ways your enemies never thought possible.